No one expected that behind the light laughter and the relaxed atmosphere between these two entertainment icons, there would be one of the most shocking revelations from a global music legend. A confession that didn't just stir the small studio but left listeners across the world stunned. Because in what seemed like a casual podcast with Conan O'Brien, Chris Martin suddenly opened up about a topic he had never publicly discussed before. The belief that the future of music isn't just about melodies or lyrics, but about the courage to merge it with something more visceral and visual, dance, because according to him, the young generation no longer merely listens, they want to feel music with their bodies, dance with the sound, tremble with the beat. And when Conan responded with a small chuckle, "So you're going to start dancing at every Coldplay concert now?" Chris simply raised an eyebrow and said, "If I could, I'd learn from them, and by them, I mean clearly, BTS." And instantly the atmosphere in the room shifted because that name doesn't just represent a global pop phenomenon but a symbol of boundary-breaking collaboration that's influenced nearly every artist in the industry. And Chris didn't just mention BTS in general, he focused sharply on one name that he repeated 3 times over the next 10 minutes. Suga, with a tone and expression that wasn't casual or superficial but filled with technical and emotional admiration. Because for him, Suga isn't just a rapper or producer, but the embodiment of what he calls thunderous silence. A phrase Chris used while gripping the arm of his chair, then looking at Conan and saying, "You know, man, when I listen to Suga's work, I feel like I'm talking to someone older than time itself." And Conan, who had been smiling, fell silent for a moment, flipping through the pages of his notebook as if searching for a question that now felt irrelevant, because the conversation had shifted into a deeper emotional realm, and Chris continued, "Not every BTS member can create that kind of atmosphere. Suga has this heavy silence. In every note he inserts a pause, and in that space I feel the most honest form of art." While in the background, the silent digital piano seemed to understand that this moment of dialogue was more profound than any music that could be played. And when Conan finally asked, "Do you want to work with him?" Chris Martin didn't answer with words. He simply looked out the large window behind the camera, took a quiet breath, then gave a faint smile and said, "Sometimes you don't choose collaboration, you just wait for the universe to bring you together." And for some reason, right after that line, Conan let out a soft laugh and leaned his head back against the chair whispering, "I think the fans already sense something from the way you're talking." But Chris only gave a small nod, making the air even more ambiguous because no one knew whether his statement was an admission or just a passing breeze. Yet among all that uncertainty, there was one moment when he slightly turned his body, pointed at a black cap on the floor that read, "Daychwita," and said, "I didn't bring this randomly." Conan leaned forward, eyes briefly darting to the cap on the floor before returning to Chris's face. And for a split second the humor in the room gave way to something almost reverent, as if both men realized the weight of what had just been said. And Chris, still staring at the cap, exhaled slowly and added, "When I first heard that track, Daychwita, I felt disoriented, like someone had thrown me into a parallel universe where history, rage, and grace collided." And Conan, clearly caught off guard by the rawness of that statement, muttered, "Jesus, man, you're really into this?" And Chris, without looking up, nodded and replied, "It's not just fandom, it's resonance." Then lifted his head and continued with a calm intensity, "You see, most music tries to entertain or distract, but Suga's work tries to confront, to disassemble, to rebuild." And Conan let out a low whistle, visibly trying to process the depth of Chris's emotional connection, flipping his notebook closed as if silently, acknowledging that the script was now irrelevant, that they had stumbled onto something far more intimate and unfiltered. And just then Chris leaned back, one leg tucked under him, and said something that even surprised himself. "I've never said this aloud, but if I had to pick one person outside Coldplay to help write the final Coldplay record, I think it would be him." And there it was, a statement so precise and personal it hung in the air like smoke, while Conan's mouth opened slightly as if to respond, but no words came, and after a beat of silence Chris chuckled and shook his head. "You're not going to air that part, are you?" And Conan, still stunned, finally grinned and said, "Oh no, we're airing every damn second of it." Which sent both of them into another burst of laughter. But underneath it all, you could feel the shift had happened. Something about this moment was no longer just a celebrity interview. It had become a portal into the artistic soul of a man who has sold out. stadiums, written anthems, and now, in the quiet glow of this room, confessed his deep creative yearning to connect with a voice from the other side of the world who rarely speaks but always says everything. And before the laughter died down, Chris turned a little more serious and added, "He doesn't perform for you, he doesn't impress you. He lets you feel what it's like to be inside his skin for 3 minutes. And Conan," his tone suddenly gentler, said, "That's what you're trying to do too, right?" And Chris replied softly, "That's what we're all trying to do, but he does it without asking permission." And with that the room fell into a strange calm, the kind that feels like the air before a storm or the hush after a confession. And as Chris reached down to pick up the Dachwita cap and set it on the coffee table between them, Conan looked down at it, then up at Chris again and said, "You know this is going to explode the internet, right?" But Chris just smiled, shrugged and said, "That's not why I said it," then looked back toward the window, the light pouring in like some kind of omen, leaving a silence so full it was louder than anything either of them had played or said. And in that moment, even without any announcement or official confirmation, there was something irreversible about what had been shared, something that couldn't be undone. And even though the camera kept rolling and Conan was already reaching for the next question on a now pointless list, everyone who watched would know exactly what had just happened. And yet just when it felt like the moment had reached its peak, Chris leaned forward again, this time more animated, rubbing his hands together like someone on the edge of a revelation, and with a grin that couldn't quite mask the urgency behind it he said, "I've actually been working on something, just an idea, but the whole time I've had his voice in my head. Not literally, but the energy of it, the silence between his bars, the weight of what he doesn't say." And Conan raised an eyebrow, tapping his pen on the now closed notebook and asking slowly, "Are you saying you've written a song with him in mind?" And Chris nodded without hesitation, yes, or at least with his essence in mind. And then he did something no one expected. He reached into the side pocket of his seat and pulled out a small folded sheet of handwritten lyrics, carefully placing it on the table like something sacred. And although the camera never zoomed in and the microphones didn't catch what was written, Conan's expression changed the instant his eyes scanned the page, eyebrows knitting together in curiosity and awe before he looked up and said, "You wrote this already?" And Chris replied, "I did 2 nights ago." Then leaned back again, fingers laced, looking momentarily shy for the first time. "I don't even know if I'll ever release it, but it came from this place of watching him create from such personal pain, but turning it into this universal emotion. And I thought, what if we both wrote from silence, from the things we refused to say?" And as Conan handed the paper back with a careful reverence, he said, "I don't think you're going to get out of this without sending it to him." To which Chris simply said, "I already did." And the shock on Conan's face was instant, blinking twice before asking, "Wait, are you serious?" And Chris nodded. "I didn't say it was mine, I just signed it Sam and left the rest blank." Then grinned mischievously. "If he reads it and knows, he knows?" And suddenly there was a buzz in the air like something magical had been set in motion. Like this simple exchange had opened a door to something bigger, and Conan laughed again, shaking his head. "That's either the most genius or most insane thing I've ever heard." But Chris was calm now, hands resting on his knees, face glowing with the kind of peace that only comes when an artist says what he truly means. And as the room brightened with afternoon light creeping in through the windows, Chris looked around and added, "You know what I admire most about him?" Pausing just long enough for Conan to lean in again, "It's not the fame or the skill. It's the way he stays still in a world obsessed with motion." And those words hung in the air like a spell, making even Conan pause mid-smile and say quietly, "I think that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard anyone say on this podcast." And Chris just nodded, silent now, looking down at the cap on the table as if it were a relic from another world. And at that exact second a low hum from the nearby keyboard activated itself briefly, likely from a vibration or signal, but it was enough to make both men look at it with widened eyes before bursting into laughter, the kind of cosmic timing that feels impossible to fake.